All right, my awesome money savvy squad, get ready for a story that's going to make your jaw drop, a tale of high-stakes financial warfare that went down in 2022, a saga that proves just how brutal and frankly rigged the global financial system can be. This isn't just some dry economic lecture. This is real-life drama, billions of dollars on the line, and a lesson about power that you absolutely cannot afford to ignore. So picture this: China's biggest nickel producer, a behemoth called Tsingshan Holdings, decided it wanted to play a little game of risk management. They had massive nickel production, and to hedge against future price drops, they shorted a colossal 150,000 tons of nickel on the London Metal Exchange. The LME, basically they were betting the price of nickel would go down. Now, enter the Wall Street wolves, these hedge funds, these absolute sharks. They sniffed blood in the water. The Russia-Ukraine conflict was kicking off, a perfect black swan event, and they saw their chance. They started buying up every single physical nickel contract they could get their hands on, driving the price up, and I mean up in just 2 days. The price of nickel exploded by 250%. Think about that. 250%. Tsingshan, the Chinese nickel king, was suddenly staring down the barrel of a massive short squeeze. They were facing margin calls of tens of billions of dollars, facing imminent, catastrophic bankruptcy. Meanwhile, in their fancy offices in New York, the Wall Street fund managers were already chilling the champagne, ready to celebrate their windfall, billions of dollars about to drop into their laps. But back in Tsingshan's headquarters in Wenzhou, China, the air pressure was dropping, the countdown to liquidation was ticking. Then, on March 8, 2022, at 8:15 a.m. London time, something happened that is absolutely definitively etched into the annals of financial history. The London Metal Exchange, the LME, announced it was immediately halting all nickel contract trading. If you think that was the full extent of this unprecedented move, you'd be sorely mistaken, because the LME then dropped a second bombshell, a decision so aggressive, so utterly unheard of in Western finance, it felt almost sacrilegious. They announced they were canceling all nickel trades made between midnight and 8:15 a.m. that very morning. Every single profit generated in those 8 hours. Gone, poof, wiped clean. The entire Wall Street ecosystem absolutely erupted. And why not? $3.9 billion, nearly $4 billion, was just erased with a stroke of a pen. The fat, juicy profits that the long position holders were about to swallow, the referee, the LME, literally reached into their mouths with pliers and yanked it out. Fund managers were probably throwing their keyboards across the room, screaming obscenities. What kind of free market is this? They howled. I made those gains fair and square by playing by the rules, by buying the price up. You can just pull the plug on me. If prices had fallen, would you have cared about the short sellers just because the longs were making too much money? You flipped the table over, are you serious? Afterward, a lot of people online started chirping, oh, the LME pulled the plug because it was acquired by the Hong Kong Stock Exchange in 2012. It has Chinese blood now. So it's protecting Chinese companies like Tsingshan Holdings, folks. Please, for the love of all that is financially logical, do not, I repeat, do not use that kind of naive fan club mentality to understand the brutal realities of international finance. Capital has no nationality. Capital only cares about survival and destruction, pure and simple. The LME, by making that move, risked completely destroying its reputation, facing potentially tens of billions of dollars in lawsuits, and they did it not to protect Tsingshan Holdings, but to protect itself, to protect the entire European financial system. And here's where I need to drop some serious financial truth on you, something most retail investors have absolutely no clue about. The ultimate hidden system lurking in the deep ocean of finance. The clearinghouse and broker-dealer system. You probably thought Tsingshan Holdings just directly deposited its margin with the LME, right? Wrong. In the ruthless world of international commodities, exchanges don't directly deal with individual companies. There's a crucial layer in between, a layer of clearing members. These are the massive international banks, like JP Chase, Standard Chartered, BNP Paribas, and so on. Think of it this way. The LME is the ultimate high-stakes casino, and these huge banks, they like the VIP room operators, the ones who run the private tables, Tsingshan Holdings. They the super high roller playing in the VIP room. Tsingshan borrows money from JP Chase to place its bets, and JP Chase, acting on Tsingshan's instructions, goes onto the LME floor to bet against others. This creates a terrifying chain of liability. The LME, it only recognizes these big banks, not Tsingshan. So when nickel prices surged to $100,000 a ton on March 8th, the system calculated that the short positions, including Tsingshan needed to cough up tens of billions of dollars in margin calls. The LME wasn't calling Tsingshan. Oh no, they were calling JP Chase and Standard Chartered. Hey, your short positions just blew up. You need to wire $10 billion to the clearinghouse account by 9 a.m. If you are even a penny short, we reliquidating your positions. At that moment, JP Chase had no choice but to turn to Tsingshan Holdings. Boss, we in deep trouble. We need $10 billion now to cover these margin calls. But how? How could Tsingshan Holdings, no matter how powerful its industrial empire, no matter how valuable its Indonesian mines, conjure up $10 billion in cash in a matter of hours? Mr. Xiang, the owner of Tsingshan, could only throw up his hands. Money, I don't have it. Physical nickel, sorry, I only have high purity nickel pig iron, and that doesn't meet LME delivery standards. This, my friends, is the real truth behind why the LME pulled the plug. If Tsingshan Holdings couldn't come up with the money and defaulted, who would be left holding the bag for that multi-billion-dollar mess? The answer, JP Morgan Chase, Standard Chartered, and all those other brokerage firms. They would have to dip into their own pockets, paying off Tsingshan's debt, filling that gaping financial chasm. But think about how insane the market conditions were. Then, it was just Tsingshan that was getting hammered, with nickel prices up 250%. A massive wave of short-selling hedge funds and physical traders were also getting completely wiped out. If they had settled at $100,000 a ton, the entire London metal market would have faced a margin deficit of almost $20 billion. And the first institutions to crumble would have been these intermediary banks. Imagine if the LME hadn't pulled the plug, if they had let the price stay at $100,000. By 9 a.m. that morning, several medium-sized brokerage firms would have collapsed instantly, unable to come up with hundreds of millions or even billions to cover their liabilities. And once those smaller firms went under, their bad debts would have punched straight through the LME Clearinghouse's default fund, pushing it past its breaking point. Then, even giants like JP Morgan Chase would have faced a tsunami of bad debt, their financial statements instantly turning to rubble. This wasn't just about one Chinese company going bankrupt, my friends. This was a Lehman Brothers moment 2.0. This was the entire European, and by extension, global metal trading system facing massive brain death. Matthew Chamberlain, the CEO of the LME, was in the control room watching those skyrocketing numbers, and the cold sweat must have been running down his back. The Wall Street longs thought they were hunting a fat sheep. But Chamberlain, he saw clearly that sheep was strapped with tons of C4 explosives, and the detonator was wired directly to the load, bearing walls of the entire London Metal Exchange. If the longs had won, whether Tsingshan died or not was irrelevant, because the LME, a century-old institution, along with dozens of core investment banks in London, would have been reduced to rubble by morning, and no one in the world would ever dare trade in London again. So, faced with a choice between losing a little credibility, getting yelled at by Wall Street, and the instantaneous physical annihilation of the entire financial system, the LME made an incredibly sober decision. Flip the table, everybody freeze. Sorry, Wall Street friends, that $3.9 billion you made last night, that was a system glitch, a market anomaly. We don't recognize it. And not only do we not recognize it, but you are not allowed to trade for the next few days. Everybody calm down. This move, it literally inflicted internal injuries on the Wall Street titans. Top-tier hedge funds like Elliott Management and quantitative giants like Citadel were absolutely furious. Their eyes probably bulging out of their heads, they immediately filed a lawsuit against the LME. In the UK High Court, demanding $470 million in damages, their lawyers roared in court. We played by the rules. This is blatant robbery. You are stealing money from the winners to protect a defaulting short seller. But the LME's lawyers coolly retorted, if we hadn't canceled the trades, the LME Clearinghouse would have faced multiple member defaults that day, triggering systemic risk. We were saving the market. You see, my friends, this is the ultimate fundamental logic of the financial world. When your losses become so gargantuan that they threaten to drag the entire system down with you, there is only one true rule: the system absolutely, under no circumstances, can be allowed to die, and for the system to survive, the rules can be changed at any moment, the plug can be pulled. This is why we always say the big players cannot be allowed to fail. Tsingshan Holdings, even though it was on the brink, its massive short position, ironically, had essentially held the entire system hostage, buying itself precious breathing room. But my friends, even though the plug was pulled and trading was halted, Tsingshan's crisis was far from over. The $100,000 price point was erased. Yes, but nickel was still hovering at an extremely high $48,000 to $50,000 a ton. As soon as trading resumed, Tsingshan was still facing forced liquidation and massive debts. Mr. Xiang was still hanging by a thread on the edge of a cliff. How could Tsingshan, with no physical nickel matching LME standards, possibly withstand the inevitable, furious counterattack from Wall Street once the market reopened? Who would step in during this darkest hour, offering the sword of Damocles to this Chinese enterprise, capable of turning the tide? Everyone knew this was just a pause button. The bomb's fuse hadn't been diffused. The LME couldn't stay closed forever. As soon as trading reopened, nickel prices would still be astronomically high, around $50,000, and Tsingshan Holdings' 150,000-ton short position was still a massive mountain crushing them. The Wall Street longs hadn't gone anywhere. They were circling like hungry wolves, sharpening their knives, just waiting for the opening bell to ring, ready to explode the price again and tear Tsingshan to shreds. Mr. Xiang was still on the precipice to survive. He had to achieve two seemingly impossible tasks within days. First, fill a multi-billion-dollar margin hole, and second, acquire physical, high-purity electrolytic nickel compliant with LME standards to smash the long's positions. Just when the whole world thought Tsingshan Holdings was doomed, that it was beyond salvation, a miracle, or rather, the sheer power of industrial might revealed itself. Remember this saying, my friends. If you owe the casino $1 million, that's your problem. But if you owe the casino $10 billion, that's the casino's problem. Tsingshan Holdings, as the world's largest nickel producer, was an enormous real-world industrial empire in a life, or death situation like this. Its fall would send shockwaves throughout the global new energy battery supply chain. It would cause an earthquake, and those international banks I mentioned earlier, they would also be dragged down with it. So, in a bizarre, almost unbelievable display of unspoken mutual understanding, a closed-door negotiation happened. Incredibly fast on the night of March 14th, Tsingshan Holdings dropped a bombshell, an official statement that stunned the entire world. The statement was short, just a few sentences, but every single word hit Wall Street's long positions like a freight train. Statement point 1. Tsingshan Holdings had reached a standstill agreement with a syndicate of major banks, translation, JP Morgan Chase, and the other big banks, holding their noses, reluctantly conceded. They agreed that during the standstill period, they would absolutely not force liquidate Tsingshan Holdings, and they would even provide Tsingshan with ample credit lines to cover its margin calls. The Wall Street longs, most powerful weapon, the margin call, had been nullified, disarmed. Statement point 2, the real killer blow. Tsingshan Holdings had secured sufficient physical nickel for delivery when that sentence hit. Every single short seller on Wall Street must have gasped. Remember, Tsingshan primarily produced high-purity nickel pig iron, which doesn't meet LME delivery standards. How could they possibly acquire hundreds of thousands of tons of high-purity electrolytic nickel in just a few days? While official details weren't disclosed, the entire commodities world buzzed with rumors of an incredibly hardcore operation, a national-level swap. China is one of the world's largest metal reserve holders, and domestically, many state-owned enterprises held vast quantities of fully LME compliant, high-purity electrolytic nickel. In this critical moment, Chinese enterprises demonstrated incredible coordination. Mr. Xiang, you only have high-purity nickel pig iron, but I have pure nickel here. Pledge your future production to me, and I'll lend you my pure nickel from my warehouses. Take it to London and crush those foreign devils. This move, fighting fire with fire, playing the financial game with physical assets, was an absolute stroke of genius, a masterstroke in financial history. You Wall Street guys want physical delivery. Fine, now I not only have the money, but I also have the physical nickel. As soon as the market opened, if the longs dared to push the price to $100,000, Tsingshan was ready to dump hundreds of thousands of tons of physical nickel on them at that outrageous price, making them bankrupt by forcing them to buy this scrap metal at an exorbitant cost. The tables had turned. The hunters had become the hunted. The Wall Street titans, who were just days ago orchestrating a short squeeze, now found themselves trapped with their expensive long contracts suddenly turning into liabilities. On March 16th, the LME resumed nickel trading to prevent another meltdown. The LME literally changed the rules, imposing daily price limits on nickel, and the moment the market opened, there was no suspense, no resistance. Nickel plummeted like a stone, hitting the daily limit. It hit the limit the first day, the second day, the third day. The insane bubble was mercilessly popped. Those overseas speculators and hedge funds who tried to opportunistically jump in at the $100,000 peak, chasing the momentum, were trapped by the limit down, unable to escape. Facing their own night of liquidation, eventually the price of nickel obediently fell back to around $30,000, reflecting its fundamental value. This heart-stopping, insane nickel war ended with Tsingshan Holdings' desperate but ultimately successful self-preservation and Wall Street longs' impotent rage. But my friends, when we peel back the layers of this multi-billion-dollar battle, if we just view this as a feel-good story of a Chinese company making a comeback against Wall Street, we've completely missed the point. This was absolutely not a victory. This was an incredibly costly, bloody, and painful lesson. Looking back, in this tumultuous period of great change, the Nickel War delivered a profound lesson to all Chinese enterprises, and to every single ordinary person. Dignity only comes from strength. Truth only comes from the barrel of a cannon, and the security of wealth, along with the pricing power of commodities, ultimately depends on the strength and independence of our nation's financial system. Friends, in the Nickel War, even though Tsingshan Holdings was pushed to the edge of the cliff, at least the exchange pulled the plug to give it a lifeline. Imagine this. What if the Wall Street behemoths weren't playing with futures, but instead came to your company as headquarters with tens of billions of dollars in predatory predatory high. Interest loans kicked open your boardroom doors and forcibly dismantled your century-old enterprise, tearing it apart, splitting its shares, and draining its assets. What if, in that moment, there was no referee to save you? What would you do then? In our next video, we re-leaving London and flying to the glittering, decadent New York of the 1980s to dissect one of the most famous, most insane, and largest hostile takeovers in human business history, a multi-hundred billion-dollar corporate raid. Get ready.